my name's Dave Farley of Continuous Delivery. Welcome to the Engineering Room, a series of conversations with influential people from our industry. This episode's a little bit different to the usual content on the Continuous Delivery channel. This is an addition to our usual weekly output and is meant in part as a small Christmas present to our viewers and subscribers and a thank you for your support over the past year. If you'd like to see more content like this, please do subscribe and let us know, and just let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Today, I'm talking with an old friend of mine, not so old really, but a friend nevertheless, a Java expert, Trisha Gee. If you've ever the chance to work on a team with Trish, take it. She's a great teammate. Trish and I worked together some years ago on a project to build one of the world's highest performance financial exchanges. Trish significantly improved the teamwork at LMAX. I can remember her rewarding good build discipline with chocolate bars and taking on the responsibility unasked for making us all improve our discipline around managing flaky tests. And we did a better job as a result of those changes. So much so that we ended up building a tool that automated what Trish was doing, analysing our test results, and helped us to get to highlight suspected intermittent tests. It was called Auto Trish in her honour. Trish is an excellent software developer, a Java champion, a developer advocate, helping software developers level up in their career. She's also a well-established conference speaker, a writer, and has been involved in the publication of several books. She's just told me she's working on 2 at the moment, including 97 Things Every Java Programmer Should Know. That's not the one that she's working on. That's available in the stores now. Trish very kindly wrote the foreword to my new book, Modern Software Engineering. So let me introduce you to Trisha Gee. Trish, welcome and thank you for agreeing to have this chat today. So what's a developer advocate and how do we level up?
Great. Thank you for your introduction, by the way. You make me sound really awesome. What's a developer advocate? Yeah, not an amazing software engineer like you were suggesting. One of the things that I really, so one of the reason I went into developer advocacy, I think I'm going to start there because it segues a bit from what you were saying about where we worked in London. Yeah. When we were working together in London, I learned so much there. I learned so much from the pair programming. I learned so much from you, from Martin, from all these people. I learned a lot about how to use IntelliJ IDEA in an effective way from all that pair programming, and it blew my mind. I was like, I've been a programmer for 10 years. I considered myself competent, but over the 4 years there, I grew exponentially. And what I really wanted to do is I wanted to take that experience I got from you and all the others and give that to other developers, because I felt like I spent 10 years doing perfectly adequate jobs that were perfectly fine, that were perfectly normal. And I know that a lot of people are doing that too. And I really wanted to reach those developers and say, great, fine, but there's better, there's even more, and you can learn more if you want to. You can learn more, you can make your job easier by learning your tools better, or you can level up by doing things like some of the developer advocacy stuff, like you can start writing, you can start speaking at conferences. So I was super inspired by working with you and the team and also from your influence from ThoughtWorks, because of course the ThoughtWorks folks are quite a lot like that as well. To get out there and kind of share my experiences and share my enthusiasm and say, like, there's better ways to do stuff. And it's not just about being more effective or more efficient. It's about enjoying your job more. It's about sort of getting into flow better and understanding more what you're trying to achieve, and finding the types of roles where your skill set, whatever that is, are better appreciated. And so I started blogging about what we'd been doing. I started speaking at conferences, and then I ended up saying, well, I want to do more and more of this. So I ended up going into a job where my job is to a blog about what I do, what I've learned, to speak at conferences, to meet developers, to be part of user groups, to be on Twitter all the time speaking to people. And the developer advocacy thing is a two-way thing. Like, I share the stuff that I've learned, but I also learn a lot from other people as well. So I hear from developers, what are you doing? What's interesting? What's difficult? Like, what are the things that real people are doing? Because that's one of the downsides of being a developer advocate, is you're no longer necessarily working on a software team. What are you doing? What tools are you using? How is that helpful? How is that not helpful? And then you get a bit of a chance to kind of experiment with some of those things as well. And so, yeah, so leading on to what you're saying about leveling up, then there's like, multiple directions to level up in, which is kind of great and frustrating at the same time. So when you're starting out as a developer advocate, you're going to level up in terms of skills like your writing skills and your speaking skills and your interpersonal skills, and a lot of things that I think, having done consultancy, some of that stuff kind of gets trained into you as a consultant because you have to do client-facing work. So you learn a lot there. But one of the other things that I found interesting from a technical point of view is that when you're a software developer, you learn a lot on the job, of course. You know, you get plunged into a project and now you have to learn Spring Data, or you have to learn reactive this or whatever. When you're a developer advocate, you don't have the advantages of being in the environment where they're using those technologies, you know, and so you're kind of forced to learn them. But you do have the advantage of picking and choosing a little bit more, like, what am I going to learn? How do I want to learn it? How do I want to pace that? How would I create sample code from scratch that might demonstrate something, which is also really challenging, because how do you create an enterprise application from scratch in 3 weeks? Like, that's not possible, right? So so I've really enjoyed doing this job because it's got all these different tendrils and all these different things. And if you get a bit conferenced out, which is obviously not happening at the moment because I went to conferences for 2 years, but if you get conferenced out, then you're like, I'm going to spend a month doing code because I need the code time. Or like at the moment, because I've been doing a lot of video content for the IntelliJ Idea YouTube channel, then this summer I'm like, I need to do some more written stuff. I just want to be able to focus on one thing and do something more in depth and longer and written, hence the book projects as well. So I get to play with all these different things, and that's kind of, it's simultaneously overwhelming and fun.
Wow, I'm blown away. There was lots in there. So let me take that in order. so first, I'm kind of embarrassed at the stuff that you were saying about us and the team. It was a delightful team. It was a fantastic opportunity, and one of the things that I know I used to say to people, but I believed, was that I hoped that we were trying to create an environment that would be career defining for people, and I think it was for many, if not most, of the people that worked there. It certainly was for me, and you know, from what you said, certainly it was for you too. And it was a great place to work and an awful lot of fun. And I agree with you. You know, I think that one of the attributes of software development, if we want to do excellent work, human beings are the, you know, software development is this highly creative discipline, and if we want to be highly creative, and we don't think of it like that very often, but it is. And if we want to be creative, then humans are at their most creative when they're kind of relaxed and playing. And so you want to try and you want people to enjoy themselves. You know, it's hard work. It can be solving difficult problems, but that can be a delight. That can be a fantastic thing, a very rewarding thing to do. You know, sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to back up what you just said there. Like, I think you might be one of the first people who said to me that that software engineering is a creative thing. I mean, people sort of say that, but really, when you were comparing it to filmmaking, I was like, of course, there's a blend of technical and creative in certain types of roles. Yeah. And you have to free your creativeness and not just speak to the computer.
Indeed, yeah. And the other thing that I liked about what the way that you just described all of that was the importance of communication. It makes me. I think it might have been Kevlin Henney that said, a friend of us both, I know, but I think he's the person that said that, you know, how do you expect somebody that can't write good comments to write good code? Also, I'm paraphrasing a bit, but you know, it's an act of communication, and the more you grow your skills around being able to communicate and so on. And I think both of us have moved on in you know, the current phase of our careers to be. I've started to think of myself a little bit like the science communicators. You know, famous people like Brian Cox. I'm not actually doing, you know, the work so much anymore, but I'm trying to communicate it and explain it in a way without dumbing it down, but just make it, you know, understandable and yeah, accessible. And I think you do similar things. You do the same sort of thing, and you know, I think there's a role for that, and I think it's important because I think that one of my things is that our discipline is primarily, or should be primarily, focused on learning, and therefore we should all become experts at learning and focus on that.
Yeah, I really want to pick up on that bit too as well. I'm going to interrupt you a lot.
That's right. Please.
What we do a lot of in my team as developer advocates is we produce a lot of content, right? So we do write a lot of stuff, and we do videos, and we produce and publish a bunch of stuff. Sometimes it doesn't work out. So for example, a colleague of mine is working on something right now where the thing that she was the conference that she was going to be speaking at, the slot that she had got pulled. So all the research that she'd been doing for that particular technology now doesn't have a content outlet. There's no produced artifact at the end of that. And she's like, oh my goodness, what a waste of time. I just invested like 3 weeks learning this particular technology, and I don't have anything to show for it. Like, should I go away and do a screencast and publish it on the channel so that I don't waste all of that research? And I said, absolutely not, because the output is the learning, not the content.
Yeah.
Right. So the learning is way more important, even if, so she was struggling a little bit with this particular technology. And at the end of it, she's like, I could do a video, but I don't really want to. I just don't really love this technology. And I haven't worked in a field where we've been using it. So it's difficult for me to kind of like phrase it in a way which is like, these are good practices, these are bad practices, or this is what I've seen used. And she's like, I'm struggling a bit with it, and I don't love it. And I'm like, then that's what you learned. And that's the output of this research. Yeah. You don't love it. Fine. Don't waste any more time on it. Move on to learning the next thing.
That's one of my other things is that I think it's really important to work in general, in the broad, whatever it is that you're doing, in ways that are experimental, in experimental ways, which means that sometimes your experiments are going to fail and sometimes they're going to succeed. So your colleague experimented with a technology that she found she didn't like very much. That's the result. She discovered something, she learned something, as you said. And I think that's important that we free ourselves to do that, because otherwise you tend to end up channeling reasonably safe courses, and you're not going to do anything innovative or really creative if you're channeling those sorts of well-trodden courses, I think.
Yeah, I mean, scientists aren't going to find anything if they don't have experiments that fail. Like, failure teaches you way more than success sometimes.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. So that's interesting, because you're kind of written. Understandably, we work together for a while and think very similarly about things, but you're reinforcing my views certainly in that. So you began working with the London Java user group some times ago, and I think your name is closely associated with Java these days. You now organise the Sevilla, I should say, Java user group, along with Isra, your husband. So what do you see the benefits of those sorts of user groups and communities? You've been involved in those sorts of things for a long time now, to my knowledge.
There's really so many benefits, and that's why I think I'm always encouraging people to get involved, because there will be something that works for you. So for example, in retrospect, the best thing about joining the London Java community was I actually met my husband. I mean, I guess that's probably a good thing. I'm not sure sometimes. So yes, that was a good thing. I met him there. In fact, the reason I joined the London Java community is I just moved back from living in New York for a year, and I needed a job, and it was 2008, and there weren't a lot of jobs on the ground at the time. So this new user group thing, which had just started on Meetup in London, seemed like a good way for me to meet people and to potentially find out about new jobs. One of the things I discovered very early about going to user groups is instead of getting random recruiters calling you and then putting your CV forward, and then you go through this awful process of like, I would usually be applying for, multiple jobs at once. I'd be interviewing for like, I don't know, 6, 7, 10, 12 jobs at once, trying to keep track of everything, just so that you can keep your options open and make sure that you get something which isn't terrible. Whereas when you go to a user group, you go to a meetup of maybe, well, in London, probably about 100 people, something like that, 80 people. And then afterwards, of course, you go to the pub when there's like 20, 30 people. You can ask all of those people, where do you work? Are you hiring? Do you like it? What are you doing? And you're asking the real people about their real jobs. And you're getting a feel for things like what technologies are really in use, how people are really using it, do people like it, and it's I found it a more helpful way to get a job. Later, I didn't actually get my first job through that. Actually, I got my first job in London after New York through a random recruiter, and that first job did not work out very well. So then another random recruiter put me forward for the company that we ended up working for, and I was like, this is where I want to work, because you interviewed me, Martin interviewed me, and that interview process was a learning experience, because I couldn't answer one of Martin's questions about like hash codes and linked lists and stuff, and I was like, oh my god, I'm failing this interview. And he walked me through it and taught me on the whiteboard how this stuff works and why it works. And I was like, I want to work here, because again, it's about the learning experience. Anyway, I digress. So when I was working there, then I started going back to the user group, because I thought, well, this is a good way for me to meet people that I want to hire to work with us, because we're doing a lot of pair programming, and it's really important that you have a connection with someone, that you want to work with that person. And you were saying to me when I started interviewing people for that job, and your criteria was, do I want to work with this person every single day? Which is an obvious criteria, but I've done interview training before and no one's ever phrased it to me that way in the past. You go to a user group and you chat with them, and you find out, you kind of chat with them in a more relaxed and casual way, and you get to know whether you really want to work with them. Hence, when I started chatting to Isra, and I said, like, put your CV in, he ended up working with us, and then I ended up dating him and moving to Spain with him and having children and marrying, but that was not part of the plan. And then now things are a bit different, because
I'm not sure that's something that we can honestly advertise user groups as regularly facilitating.
I think that if you're a woman of a particular age and you're looking to find a professional man, I think you can do worse than a user group to find, professional men with jobs. But I don't want to use it.
Fair comments.
I think for guys it's a little bit more difficult, but for the women, I think it's not a bad place to be. But yeah, and later on it gets a bit more tricky, because especially, so I've got 2 little kids now, and a husband, so I don't need to go to user groups anymore. No, but seriously, I still invest time in user groups, because for a number of reasons. Again, like I say, it's all very different. It depends on where you are in your career and what you want right now. So I find user groups really helpful for, in some ways, some of the similar things I was just talking about. I like to connect with real developers. What are you doing? What are you working on? So for example, when we first moved to Seville, and we were talking about the stuff that Isra and I were talking about, the stuff that we'd been doing together in our team, and saying, obviously, we thought test-driven development was a little bit out there. Not everyone's going to write their tests first, but a lot of developers were saying they're not writing unit tests at all. And we were like, oh, right, okay. And you get a sense for, like, you can gauge where is the development community generally, where, if you're going to be telling them about, like, advanced IntelliJ IDEA use for test-driven development with continuous delivery, and they're here going, I don't know how to write a unit test. Like, you're not doing advocacy properly, you're not helping these people, you just, it's a massive disconnect. So it's really helpful for sort of figuring out, from my job point of view as a developer advocate, it's really helpful for research purposes, but it's also because I'm really interested in our community and what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong or not great. I'm just kind of curious about, like, how are companies working these days? So for example, things I don't know about, are you using Docker? Like, how are you using Docker? What's Docker for? The sorts of things that I didn't get to work on when I was doing engineering, because it wasn't invented yet. So you still use it. I still use it for research purposes. So yeah, so I think that's the main reason I'm still involved in the community. And I get it, you can, again, from a selfish point of view, I can get a lot of feedback on things like, I often give the first pass of my talk at the local user group. So I can have a friendly audience who will come to me honestly and say, I didn't understand this, or this didn't make sense, or this bit's really great. So it's good for that sort of thing. But mostly it's just good to connect with people and find out, like, what are they up to? What's good? What's bad? Like, what's fun? Or, like, again, eventually, maybe one day, maybe there'll be someone working for a company and you'll be like, yeah, I'd quite like to work for that company.
Yeah. You were talking about that a bit from your perspective. Do you think user groups give the same kinds of advantages to people earlier on in their career and finding their feet a bit? I'm just thinking about the stuff that you were saying at the beginning about just starting to kind of soak in a little bit about what it's really like, and what the local environment, job environment and stuff's like.
I think for juniors, I mean, I would highly recommend juniors, people to start, well, honestly, I highly recommend anyone to join a user group, whether it's virtual or in person. But for juniors, I think there's a huge gap. And my colleague Helen's done a presentation about this, actually. There's a gap between what you learn at university or in boot camp versus what you actually need to do in your job. And when we were in the London Java community, so Barry, who was running the London Java community, was also running the graduate developer community. And there was, obviously, it was a good thing, a lot of bleed between, well, mostly from the graduates to the London Java community, because the graduates are like, what do I really need to know to get a job? What's it really like to work in the industry? Do I need to learn, you know, do I need to learn the solid principles? And you'd be like, no, you need to learn Git. Right, you know, it's a very different set of things that you're going to need to learn. And again, one of the things a lot of the graduates ask is they come out of university or the boot camp or whatever, and they just see how huge the ecosystem is. Like, even if it's just Java or just the JVM, but like if you expand it to web and all the rest of it, it's like there's so many frameworks, so many technologies, so many things to learn. And as soon as you get on track with one, then that becomes out of fashion and something else comes, and then Docker comes and Kubernetes. And it's not just about languages, it's about infrastructure. And like we said, communication skills and architecture. And it's enormously overwhelming. And you feel like you just got a handle on the stuff you needed to pass whatever you needed to pass. And now you've had your eyes opened to, wow, I don't know anything. And there's no way I'm going to be able to learn any of this stuff, let alone all of it. But coming to a user group, I think, and speaking to people, they're like, no, I'm not using Kubernetes and Docker. I'm doing Java, but only this bit of Java. And it's really important that you know these 4 Git commands, but the rest of it doesn't matter, you know, and getting a sense of what's really important. It's a bit like learning a new natural language. Like, I've been trying to learn Spanish, obviously, for like 6 years, more than that. We moved here 8 years ago. And I'm not fluent in Spanish, but I can order a cup of coffee. I can get a taxi to take me somewhere. You know, I can do those core things, and then you build around that. It's the same thing with technology. You don't need to know all of Docker and all of, I don't know, Scala or whatever it is. You just need to know, which bits you need to know. And going to a user group will give you a much better sense of like what's really important and what's not important. I also think, and this is something I've been really trying to do with my work as a developer advocate, it's really important for senior people who are experienced with lots of years in the industry to say, I don't know about, right? So there's a lot of things I don't know about. I have done JavaScript in the past. I have been a web developer in the past. I don't know the JavaScript frameworks right now. And I'm fine with that. If I end up working in a team where I need to know that, like we were talking about learning, I know that I can learn that, but I'll learn it when I learn it. I'm not going to learn every single JavaScript framework now, just in case I need one of them later on. That's fine. You know, and the same with Docker.
I don't think that we as an industry do a very good job of defining what the ground rules are, the kinds that you know, what are the things that allow, you know, you and I that have some people that have some experience to be able to judge how much we have to learn about a particular technology or a particular practice or stuff. What are the things that allow us to pick and choose, you know, and steer our learning, because there is too much to learn. There is almost zero value in you learning the entire command set of Git or you know, every last attribute of I don't know, React.js or whatever. I don't care. I'm a reduced instruction set programmer. There's lots and lots of stuff that I don't know and I don't care about, and it seems to me that part of the skill and the experience, the benefit of experience, is to be able to more quickly and more accurately choose the things that are worth, you know, that you need in order to be able to achieve some outcome. That's kind of I'm sorry, I'm advertising my book, but that's kind of the sort of stuff that was in the back of my mind when I started writing my book, was to try and figure out what those sorts of things were that you could look for to try and steer you through that course. Because I don't think that I think that's a difficult problem. As one of the things that you said just then resonated with me. I did a video quite a long time ago now on my YouTube channel that was focused specifically at junior developers and giving them some advice. And one of those was, you know, nobody knows everything, and the start, and ignorance is not a problem. That's just a fact of life for software developers in their career. And that was the one that landed most. I got loads and loads of comments from people relatively new in their career. So, oh, I've never heard anybody say that. That's a great thing to, because I don't know why that doesn't translate, but it seems obvious to you and I at our stage in our career, because we're used to knowing that we know nothing,
Yes.
almost, and dealing with it.
I think what we see when we go to conferences, or when we look at videos, or when we read books, what we see is someone with experience giving their very well thought out, very well planned experience on that thing they know really well. Yeah. And you're like, oh my goodness, this person, he, because usually it's not always a he, this person, he really knows what he's talking about. And like, I'll never be that good. But of course, what that person doesn't say is, okay, I know all about Java, but I don't know anything about Git. Or like we say, I don't know anything about JavaScript, or I've only worked in client server, I've never worked in microservices, whatever, and I think that's one of the things I've been trying to normalize with some of that advocacy I've been doing is, one of the reasons I do live demos on stage is because it will go wrong, and be like, okay, pair with me, tell me what you think this is that's going wrong, what have I done? And it's always something different, you can't predict that sort of thing. And I really want to normalize, like we had with the pair programming experience. You don't know what you're doing half the time, and things go wrong. And if you work together, you can find a solution, as opposed to this attitude that we sometimes see in our industry of, you don't know what you're doing, I'm better than you. Like, I don't care. Like, I don't care if you're better than me. Like, you're better than me at something, and I'm better than you at something else. And that's it's not a zero-sum game.
That's what it's one of the things that I like so much about pairing. Is that everybody's better than everybody else at something, and I want to learn the things that I want to learn from you, the things that you can teach me, and in payments, I will try and teach you the things that I know, and that's one of the benefits.
That's what works so well in our team, I think, because we were a team of we came from different places. We had worked in different parts of the industry. Some of us geographically different places, and we all came, and we all learned the good bits from everybody. Nobody dragged anyone down. The juniors asked amazing questions. Like, I remember the first few times the juniors would ask me, so I had 10 years experience, and the juniors would say, why are you doing it this way? And as soon as you find yourself answering, because I always have done it that way, you're like, you get challenged to think things through, and then working with people like Amir and yourself, who knew IntelliJ IDEA really well, like, oh wow, I should really learn how to do these things. And we all leveled up. No one dragged anyone down. There's no slowing each other down. It's just we all learn off each other.
I think that's one of the wonderful things about teaching, is that it forces you to learn better as well. You have to explain things for different people, so that in different ways, and it deepens your own understanding. I like that about the sorts of stuff that I do. I do a lot of consultancy these days, and writing, and YouTube-y kind of things, and all that kind of stuff, and presentations, and always, at the point at which I'm about to do something, it just forces me to try and put myself in somebody else's shoes, and to think about it from different perspectives, and I learn a lot. One of the joys of writing books is that you learn a lot more about the subject, because even a subject that you start off thinking that you know about, you learn loads during the course of writing the book, which is a lovely thing, I think.
I'm currently trying to work on the Lambdas and streams section of the updated Headfirst Java, and I've been thinking about this for Headfirst Java since Java 8 came out, so about 7 years or something. And I've been using Lambdas and streams for the last 7 years. That's one thing I've kept my knowledge up to date. I read like all the other books that are available, and I come to write the chapter, and I'm like, this is kind of how you do it. And then I was like, and then, I bet people don't really understand how this works. Oh, I wonder if you don't know how to do this, what do you do? And you end up a little bit paralyzed, because you're like, oh my goodness, like you sort of feel like saying, if you just do it, you'll get better at it. You have to be a bit more explicit than that. It's really difficult, especially because I'm used to producing content for sort of mid-level professional developers. They're already Java developers. You know, it's mostly like, these are the great keyboard shortcuts to use in IntelliJ IDEA, or, you know, these are the ways to think about constructing your application. And when you start trying to pitch it at, if not absolute beginners, then junior level programmers, then things, it changes the whole game. Okay, do they know what an if statement is? Do they understand what that does? It's really interesting.
It is interesting. So you mentioned IntelliJ and JetBrains. So you've worked there for a while now, you know, I first used IntelliJ in, I think, about 2002, and it blew me away because of the refactoring tools and the effectiveness and all those sorts of things. So I think in many ways, you're the face of the Java community from JetBrains. At least that's the way that I perceive it. That might be because I know you, but could you talk a little bit about what you see as the role of tools like those? It doesn't necessarily need to be just the IntelliJ suite if you want to broaden it, but the power of tools, I suppose, in terms of this idea of leveling up. So, you know, I tend to go for IDEs and stuff like that because I like the refactoring support rather than simpler text editors. Like, you know, I'm probably going to get flack for saying that Vi is a simple text editor, but you know,
I don't like to mention anything other than IntelliJ. I did, because I get told off by the competitors. Oh, you compared us unfairly. Yeah, I mean, I work for JetBrains because I'm a fan of IntelliJ IDEA. I'm not a fan of IntelliJ IDEA because I work for JetBrains. I always feel like I have to say that in case people go, well, you have to say that because you work there. Like, no, they hired me because I'm such a huge fan. Obviously, so for me, the IDE, the thing I learned pairing with people who really know how to use IntelliJ IDEA is that if you know how to use your tool, and especially if you develop muscle memory for it, you've got way more free space in your brain to devote to thinking about what you're really trying to do. So you're not trying to think, okay, you know, it's just thinking, well, I need to cut this thing and move it over here, and I need to, like, I wonder if I rename this, will something break over there? You're not thinking about that. You just do, I can't even remember, was it Shift F6, it renames it and it works. You don't think about it, you just move on. You know, the same with, especially because we like doing the test-driven development. I used to second guess myself when I'm implementing the code. I'm thinking, but what if this happens? What if the user puts this in? What happens if this is null? And when you're doing TDD, you don't necessarily think about that. You put it in the test, you think about it, you write a test for it, and then you go back to where you were, or whatever. You kind of use the tests to drive those what ifs instead of second guessing yourself. And with IntelliJ IDEA, you can write it much more easily, much more quickly. You can generate your tests, you can generate the code from your tests, you can generate stubs. So even when you're halfway through a thought, you can create code that compiles, make a note of whatever it was you were doing, and then move on with the thing that you're really trying to do right now. So for me, a tool like IntelliJ IDEA, it really enables me to stay in the flow for development. And we're talking about developing being a creative endeavor. And when you're doing something creative, like writing a book or like writing code, you have to be in the zone. You can't afford to be distracted, because the slightest thing that distracts you and that whole house of cards just collapses and you can't remember where you were or what you were doing. So if your tool gets out of your way, if it lets you navigate to something quickly, if it lets you refactor things with just the press of a button and does it correctly, then you don't have to rebuild that house of cards. It just you just keep moving towards the goal that you want to move towards. So obviously for me, the IDE is a big part of that, but it's not just the IDE. And I'm not just going to mention JetBrains tools, but like from the continuous delivery point of view and the testing point of view and things like that. So automated tests are great. If you're not running them, they're a massive waste of time, right? All you're going to do is find out 5 years later, oh, this test fails, which I have done, by the way, because I do a lot of project code. I stick it in GitHub. I don't bother turning on CI, and then I find out that my tests don't pass. And I've done that several times. So you need your continuous integration tools.
Now you've got GitHub Actions, so you've got no excuse.
So that's what I did. I spent some time talking about learning. I spent some time last year, or this year, who knows, because the last 2 years are basically one long year. I spent some time investigating GitHub Actions so that I could turn that on. especially because one of the sample projects I have, I wanted to have other people contributing samples to that. So then it's really important for me to turn on continuous integration. I want to know, does it compile and build? And did you break my tests? So you need to have automation for that sort of thing. I'm not, for a start, I don't want to do pull requests because I trust my team. I trust them to be able to check out some code, to have it compiling, check in some new code, and have my CI environment make sure that it still compiles and builds and the tests still run. I don't have time to be checking every single line of code that goes into my sample projects. And that's where tools and automation is really, really important, because your human brain cycles are not important for those types of activities. It's much more important to be thinking, where are we going? What are we doing? What are the problems we're trying to solve? Are they the right problems? Should I even have this project? Should I just abandon it and throw it away?
Yeah. I'm an old school C and C++ programmer, and one of the revelations of IntelliJ for me was the rename function. I can remember literally spending days, walking around my mates and saying, I've got this thing and it does this, this, and this. What do you think we should call it? And I just agonizing over a name, because it was just so bloody hard to change the name of something later on. And IntelliJ comes along and
just change it.
I should mention to be straight with everybody that I am mildly sponsored by IntelliJ in that they give me access to a free version of IntelliJ. But again, like you, it's because I'm a fan of IntelliJ and have been using it for bloody years rather than the other way around.
Right, exactly.
So I'm talking about it because I'm an enthusiast, not because I get a copy.
To be fair, so I remember some of the people of the team, they did use the other IDE, they did use Eclipse, and I remember talking about renames specifically. So I'd worked in a lot of big enterprises where things like renaming was like shared code ownership wasn't a thing. Like you knew your bits and the rest of it, you didn't touch it in case something broke. And probably you knew that somewhere else there's some like antiquated manual process that depends on the names of something. So you didn't touch anything. But I remember pairing with Steve Smith, and he'd like look at a method and be like, oh, I don't like this method name. I'll just change it in Eclipse. I'll just change it. And I'm like, oh, you just changed a method name because you wanted to. Wow, that was really mind-blowing.
That's one of the things that's deep, that the tooling really, Eclipse or IntelliJ, certainly that gave me the freedom to make the code much more malleable. It's now natural for me to work in tiny steps. So when I'm writing a test or a function or something like that, I write the value that I'm passing, particularly in a test, I'll write the value that I'm passing into the function and then extract that as a field, and then extract, pull parameters up, and using all of the refactoring tools, and it's just kind of flows out of my fingers, and that means that I can make progress in tinier steps, and therefore my code is stable at each small increment all of the time.
Yeah, I was thinking about the refactoring stuff in IntelliJ IDEA, and we were supposed to do a video about refactoring, and of course, Martin Fowler wrote a whole book about it. I can't do a 5-minute video on refactoring. So we split it into two things. We split it into everyday refactoring, and we had this idea of structural refactoring, which we haven't done that. But like exactly the thing that you're talking about, the everyday refactoring of, don't even think of it as refactoring. It's just reshaping your code. It's all about, to me, I've been thinking about this idea of like code sculpting. Like this is, it's not, you're not writing code, you're shaping it, you move it around. Like you said, it's malleable, it's squishy. You move this over here, you push this up into a parameter, you extract it, and it's fluid, it moves around. And the everyday refactorings, extract variable, extract parameter, rename, extract method, all of those things, even like pull method up and push method down and stuff like that. Like that's all allows you to do it as you're building it. It's not like it's even more incremental than red green refactor, isn't it? It's like it's red, it's refactor green, refactor red, refactor, you're just refactoring all the time.
Absolutely. It's much more pervasive than that. It's almost the way that I type when I'm writing code. It's that pervasive, I think. In the book 97 Things That Every Java Programmer Should Know, that you co-edited with Kevlin, you talk about, in one of the chapters that you wrote, you talk about keeping your finger on the pulse. And I know that you, and for many years, have kind of tracked the evolution of Java closely. So what sort of techniques do you keep up to, do you use to keep up to date? And what features of Java do you think are either underappreciated or underused?
Yes, so staying up to date, I've got a whole conference talk on, I called it becoming a fully buzzword compatible developer, because it's meant to be a funny talk, but it actually does talk about all my techniques that I use. One of the things, I mean, as part of my job, I sort of have to stay ahead of the curve. I have to figure out like where trends are going, because I need to be producing content that's kind of relevant. It's funny, actually, as a developer advocate for IntelliJ IDEA, you have sort of two roles. One, most of your developers who work for organizations that pay for licenses are probably using nice, stable, mature technologies. A lot of them are using Java EE, core Java, Spring, nothing, and like good, solid Java programs. They're not following the reactive this and the JavaScript that, but on the other hand, you need to produce content for those types of people, because there's a lot of people doing that kind of work. But you also do need to be aware of like, where are things going? What's Docker for? I keep saying Docker. I got Dahlia to do the Docker content in the end. Dahlia, do Docker. I'm not doing that. What's Docker for? What is this thing? What's microservices? When is it good? When is it bad? So partly because it makes my job easier as a developer advocate, coming up with ideas on things to write about or talk about, whatever. Partly because I'm kind of interested. But also part of my job was to produce a monthly newsletter for JetBrains, specifically around Java and the JVM. And that was a good thing. It was a twofold thing of, I have to stay up to date for the newsletter, and then newsletter forces me to stay up to date so that I can kind of carry on doing my job properly. So that's my main way. Well, I mean, I managed to hand that over in summer, so I don't have to do the newsletter anymore. So I was like, great, I don't have to stay up to date anymore, but you still do anyway. So a lot of what I do is, you can browse through Twitter. Obviously, Twitter's always got some interesting bits and pieces on it. You follow a bunch of people. I make a very, very firm effort to follow not just sort of big voices in technology, but also everyday developers, and obviously women, people from underrepresented groups, LGBTQI type, as much as possible, people with disabilities, people who are neuroatypical, basically everyone. But it's really important to get a sense of what people who are not your classic straight white guy, what they may or may not be struggling with, be it technologically or be it like so I'm getting a lot of stuff on my Twitter feed at the moment about, can you please make sure you've got alt text on your images, because I cannot read it with my screen reader if you don't put alt text on the images. And seeing that from a personal perspective has way more impact than accessibility guidelines. Make sure that you have alt text, right? So yeah. Twitter is an important source for me for not just the technology, but also a sense of how technology impacts real individuals in the real world. I also, I did sign up to a bunch of I'm looking at my email at the moment. I have a bunch of email updates of from InfoQ and DZone and Jax Enter and various Java related publications. Oh, I've got to mention Fujay.io and Inside.java. They're both kind of new places where you're going to get a bunch of Java related stuff. But I'm looking at my email like this because I've just got this torrent of information from my email. Like, all right, okay, fine. And when the new release of Java comes out, you're like, okay, I've got 75 articles on Java 17 and I don't really need that. And also I'm on the JCP executive committee, so I get a bit of a sneak peek on what standards are being decided, which includes the new version of Java. So but it's a little bit overwhelming, but the thing is, like I said, it's the finger on the pulse. It's not like riding through the blood in the veins and living everything. It's about hey, what are the words which keep coming up again and again? What are the trends? What feels like something that people feel interested in, and what feels like something that feels difficult? It's really like it's a more intuitive kind of thing. And one of the things I've got better at as I've got older is trusting my intuition, because intuition isn't magic. It's not nonsense. Your gut comes from accumulated experience. It comes from you don't have to be logical about it. You can just, in fact, you taught me that, and Dave, because you were saying that I've got a good sense for like cleanliness of code or whatever. And I'm like, I do. I don't think that way. I just go, ooh, you know, and that taught me trust your gut. And so I can kind of use that to kind of surf around what feels interesting and what doesn't feel interesting. And the Java stuff as well. I'm fortunate. I work with Malagupta, and she does a lot of, she dives into a lot of the mailing lists for what's coming in Java, and she disseminates that and kind of comes up with the interesting TLDR. So I'm like, right, she can do that. And then I can read her TLDR. And then I put that through my filter of, you know, there's 12 new features in Java 17, for example, and let's say 3 of them are garbage collection, 3 of them seem to be something to do with internals, a couple of deprecation warnings, and there's like 3 or 4 interesting syntactic things. Then I'm like, right, well, those are the things that developers are kind of, well, let me see if the deprecation warnings are going to be a problem down the line, because that's the sort of thing that developers are likely to go, okay, I don't care, until it bites them on the arse. And then the syntax stuff, I'm like, oh, let's have a look. Oh, I can think of a case 3 years ago when I was doing something over here, and that would have been really helpful for me. So then taking the syntax that's kind of shown in a fairly dry way and going, if you wanted to do this might be really helpful for that kind of thing. And yeah, so that's the fun bit. But I don't have to know all the ins and outs of what's gone into Java 17. I just go, oh, this looks fun. Let's play with it.
Cool. So are there any kind of underappreciated things that you think people have missed over the years?
Should bring up my list. So Java 9, obviously the Java versions don't really matter, but I have everything attached to Java versions in my mind. Java 9, there was this big thing about Project Jigsaw, and Java 9 breaks everything, and modularity is a problem, and all the rest of that. It turns out, especially over time, as our libraries and frameworks have dealt with a lot of those problems, generally speaking, there doesn't appear to be a huge problem moving from Java 8 to 11 or 17, the 2 long-term support releases. So there was a lot of fuss around Java 9 and, oh, modules is the big thing. But actually, one of the features I like most from Java 9, which probably people use but don't really appreciate because it's just become normal, is the I can't remember the official name, the collections factory methods, the factory methods for static factory methods for collections, whatever it is, list.of, set.of, and map.of, because it just allows you to do the stuff that you do all the time, creating a static list or a static set with, you know, and it's unmodifiable, which were array list. Oh my goodness, I can't remember what the original one was, but there was like, you could create an array list, but it wasn't unmodifiable. It was, you couldn't add to it, but you could change the elements. So list.of and things like that. I love that. I think it's really helpful on an everyday basis. And it's not pretty syntax like Lambda expressions. It's just a really helpful library method. The other thing which is underappreciated is that when Java 8 came out, we also got a whole bunch of new methods on hash map or map, which are really, really helpful. They're the sorts of things we do all the time, like, dear hash map, do you have one of these? Oh, you don't have one of these. Now I want to add one of those. And you have to have an if then else. But there's actually methods on hash map which take Lambda expressions that do that. And there's a few different ones with different variations, but basically you can do do you have one? If not, insert it or generate it or call one of these methods. And it takes a little bit of a while to get your head around, especially if you come from a pre-Java 8 world, to get your head around, like, what is this doing? Wouldn't it be easier to write an if statement? But sometimes IntelliJ IDEA will say, don't you want to use one of these new methods instead? You're like, yes, I would. Thank you, IntelliJ.
That's great. I'd like to move on a little bit, if that's okay. So in a sensible society, my question would be kind of meaningless, I think. But unfortunately, it's not. But as a woman in the software industry, you are sadly part of a small minority. So while I hate the tokenism of asking you about what you see as the importance of women in tech, because it's not the most important thing. The most important thing is, can we do a good job together and can we have fun while we're doing it? It seems to be. But I'd still like to know what you think about, the experience of women in tech. why there are so few and so on?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's been a lot of research in this area, and there's loads of articles. Once upon a time, I had like a page on my website where I just pointed people and said, like, go and read all those, but it got massively out of date. The thing I've learned from 20 years in the industry is it's complicated. It's not as straightforward as, you know, women don't want to do IT, or there's blatant sexism and that's why people don't join, or why people leave. I mean, some of that is true. There are places where there's blatant sexism, and there's places where, you know, when you're in high school, there's certain things that you are encouraged to do as a woman or as a girl or not. You know, I mean, I was fortunate enough. I think one of the reasons why I'm here actually is that I went to an all-girls school, so I didn't have that. There was no girls' roles and boys' roles. Like, the girls did everything. And then I went to an all-boys school for sixth form because they took girls there, and studied computer science. And you know, and the boys were just so excited to have girls in the school. There was no like, you can't do this. It's like, yeah, you're in my class. So I didn't really suffer from that. And then it becomes a bit difficult. There's lots of complicated things. Like when we were working together on the financial exchange, one of the reasons why I got involved in recruitment is because I wanted to try and help I want to do my bit for addressing the gender balance. And I don't think I have the same problems as other women, because I've been to like a girls' school and a boys' school, and I had a mum and dad who kind of like allowed me to see through a lot of what society expects you to do without you knowing that society is expecting you to do that. So I kind of had this X-ray vision for some of the kind of crap that comes with gender roles. But I was doing the recruitment for our company because for Java, backend, high performance, low latency, in a financial institution in London, generally speaking, the women don't apply for those sorts of roles. Because generally speaking, the sorts of men that you meet who do those sorts of roles are a little bit like the people we were talking about before, like, look at me, I'm so clever, I'm really good at this sort of thing. And like, no, like a lot of people, not just the women, a lot of people don't want to work in that kind of environment. So it's really important for me to get out to those user groups and say, hey, I work in this environment, we do pair programming, we are all about learning. The reason why we are high performance exchange is because we question everything, and it's not one person doing really smart stuff. We just work together to kind of do this sort of thing. And look, I'm a woman and I'm happy, and I'm there. So it's really important to have representation, visible representation, to allow you to attract other people from other groups into your company or into the industry. And there's another reason why I want to be a developer advocate, because it's important for me, given I've made it this far, to show that there are senior women developers with 20 years experience who continue to be technical and continue to write code, and can teach other people how to write code, because we know what we're talking about, you know. And once you get to this level of seniority, it's kind of, you want to normalize senior women in technology, and that should hopefully allow some men to adjust their expectations and to be more welcoming for the women coming in as well. Because if there's just guys, if all the books are written by guys, if all the conference talks are given by guys, if all of the visible people are guys, whether you know it or not, you are given this idea that as a woman or a person of color, that it's not for you, because you can't see you in that industry. It's really important to have the representation. But it's difficult, because it also puts it's difficult for women in the industry, especially if you want to make a difference, because when you do want to make a difference, you do have this extra job to do as well. Like you have to be visible, you have to go to user groups, you have to give talks, you have to write blogs, you have to be on Twitter, you know, and you've got extra 20% extra work that the guys can choose to do if they want to, but like they have the option not to. Like, I'm already represented, I don't really care, you know.
It's definitely a lot easier for somebody that looks like me.
And this is something else I wanted to say, actually. The reason why I'm here, the reason why I believe the reason why I've managed 20 years in industry, have been successful and got to a senior level, is because of people like you. It's very important that we have allies who are white men who are taken seriously. It's important for people like you to have me on your show and give me credit and give me visibility. It was important when we worked together for you to treat me the same as everyone else and say to me, of course you can do that stuff, you should be doing these kinds of things, you know, to push me forward. I've had conversations a bunch about the difference between mentorship and sponsorship, which actually we did a live stream on last week, which I haven't watched yet, but I'm sure it's excellent. And one of the things I read is that women are over mentored and under sponsored. And what that means is that the mentors is like the teaching, like you should get better at this, you shouldn't be like this, you should do this, and it's this extra burden again on you of like improving yourself to fit in with the world. Whereas sponsorship is more like what you and Martin Thompson and Martin Fowler did for me, which is to say, you're already ready, just go out there and do it, like speak at this conference or do this thing, or you know, and just give the women a bit of the push up the backside, tell them they're ready, tell them they're there, you know, and we trust people like you. If you say that we're ready, then we can do it. So it's really, it's not just for the women to stand up and be seen to encourage the other women. It's for the men in our industry to continue to encourage us, to give us that push and to tell us that we're ready and that we can do this.
I think it's important for all of us. It's not just important for women. It's important for all of us, everybody, that software development is one of the, you know, it's the revolution. It's probably the biggest revolution that we're going through at the moment. Maybe the energy revolution that's coming in order to try and address climate change might be as big or whatever. But at the moment, the thing that's driving more change in the world than anything is software. And to have underrepresented groups that are not taking part is hugely problematic to being able to do a good job there. There's just inbuilt assumptions all over the place that I'm not going to this spot because I'm an old white guy, and you know, and anyway, it's more fun if we're working with broader groups of people. They're going to bring different perspectives and different ideas.
For sure. I mean, I've heard stories, especially now we're using machine learning, and people think computers are unbiased. It's like, yeah, but if you feed it biased data, you know, I've heard about machine learning stuff. Obviously, there's a bunch of stuff about machine learning things being anti-women, but a lot of stuff about not being able to recognize Black people's faces. It's like, you didn't even think to put non-white people through this machine learning algorithm, you know, but if there's a bunch of different people on your team with a bunch of different backgrounds, they'll be like, hey, have you thought about doing this? Or, hey, why don't you try it on me? You know, and that diversity in terms of like racially, in terms of like gender, in terms of also, like we talked a bit about geographically and, you know, and neurodiversity and that kind of thing. In my team, we actually don't have great gender diversity because there's 4 women on my team. Terrible job with gender diversity, but we do have certain geographical diversity and cultural diversity. So it's really opened my eyes to, like you were saying about this being a bit of a Christmas present, and I think that's really really cool. I work with a bunch of Russians. I work with Mala from India, and I work with Dalia from the States. But Dalia's background is that she's not from the States originally. And so when you say to them, like, what does Christmas mean to you, or what does the end of year mean to you? The Russians don't do Christmas. Their holidays are more at the beginning of January. Their end of year thing is like a different thing. They have a different cadence to the way they work. And similarly, like Mala's going to say, well, I don't take the same time off at Christmas that you guys do, because like I said you girls do, because we're girls. And I keep telling people off for using guys, and I still can't quite get away from it. You know, so it's really interesting to have those backgrounds, because I'm trying to deliver a cadence of content or whatever, and then you find out that the entire Indian subcontinent, which is, you know, there's a few people there, like all of your assumptions completely don't apply to them, you know, and you're excluding them without even thinking about it. And so that's the key thing for me. It's not so much about like, it's not just diversity, it's about inclusion, like literally including everybody. Try and make sure that the things that you're saying, the things that you're doing, don't accidentally exclude people. And it's hard because you have to, of course, you're naturally going to exclude people whose experiences don't match your own, because you only have your own experiences. But you can change that just by listening, instead of going, well, your experience doesn't count because it's not the same as mine, going, oh, right, your experience isn't the same as mine. Tell me about that, because that might be relevant for me.
So I guess following on from that, the other aspect of this is the problems in social media that are at least widely reported in the press, and I can certainly see some signs of that. So you've got a substantial following on Twitter, for example, and my impression is that women on Twitter need, certainly in our industry, but probably more broadly, need to be much more guarded than men. Many of the women that I know are very cautious on social media because of the horrible abuse that they can sometimes face. You've already alluded to this a little bit, but to me, you've always seemed a little bit more relaxed than some people. Is that a conscious choice, or have you been kind of fortunate based on your background or your approach that you seem to be able to steer a course through that somehow, or am I just not seeing it?
No, I don't know. I honestly, like, ever since I moved into developer advocacy, which obviously requires you to be more visible, I have been aware that at some point the abuse will come, and that you will have people saying mean things to you just because they don't. I mean, it happens to men as well. It's not just the women.
It does.
But it happens to women of color, like, all the time. I've seen it. It's just so bad. It doesn't happen to me as much as I think other people have it. I don't know if that, I don't know if it's, I don't really want to say that in case people go, oh, now let's just abuse Trisha on Twitter.
Of course, yeah,
but,
don't do that.
Please don't do that. So I don't know. Some of it, I think, is, my opinion is the Java community specifically is a little, I don't want to say grown up, because I don't want to say that others are childish, but there's definitely a professional core to the Java community. And that means that generally I think people are a bit like, yeah, okay, whatever. Like, they're 9 to 5. So I think about a lot of our audience from the IntelliJ idea point of view. Your 9 to 5 developer who works in a bank or professional organization, who they're trying to improve themselves professionally. They probably have, let's say they're guys, they probably have a wife and children at home. They're not necessarily on Twitter like going, oh, Trisha, your last video is really rubbish. They're like, whatever, like, I just have better things to do with my time. So I think part of that is the audience and the community, the Java community specifically. I do strike a balance in what I say on Twitter, though. I do think carefully about everything I say on Twitter, like every single tweet. Recently, the last few weeks in particular, I've been trying to, when I started out on Twitter, I was much more open, did many more personal tweets. Since at JetBrains, a lot of my stuff ended up being much more professional because I just don't have time. Like, I just do the professional stuff and just be like, okay, fine. And then I was using like Facebook for my personal stuff because, like, my family, I'm in Spain, my family's not in Spain, so I do a bunch of stuff on Facebook. And then the rest of it, especially because, like, my close family are here. You know, I'm not going to put stuff on Twitter for my kids to read because they're 4, you know, like 4 and 6. They're not, hopefully not reading Twitter, not reading at all. So on Twitter, I've always been quite careful, and recently I've been trying to be a bit more, bring a bit more of my personality back to it, because I enjoyed having that little bit of banter and having a bit of, like we've said before, about a bit of vulnerability is important as well, to let other developers know that just because you've made it doesn't mean that you feel great all the time. Sometimes things are not that great, you know, and showing my knitting on Twitter and stuff, things like that. It is difficult. I do think about everything. And when I posted last Friday about, I said, I'm a little bit drunk and I'd like to do my knitting. Honestly, I thought for 30 minutes before posting that, because I'm like, well, A, I shouldn't be drunk posting on Twitter. And B, like, is it aligned with my brand? Am I going to get some shit from someone? You know, is it going to...
You clearly weren't drunk enough, Trish.
No, I know. And I said on there, like, I've definitely tweeted worse, drunk and sober. But yeah, like, and I had to second guess it. And are people going to be offended that I'm drinking? Because, like, everyone who knows me knows that I like a drink or two. And so, yeah, so Twitter, I don't know if it's just being a woman or having 30,000 followers. You should think about what you post on Twitter if you've got 30,000 followers. But yeah, you do have to think about it. And I don't know if I've just naturally found a bit of a balance, or I've just been extraordinarily lucky. Or also, coming back to the sponsorship thing, I wonder if, because one of the reasons I got here is by being associated with a lot of successful white guys like yourself. I wonder if like having that cohort of untouchable white guys and being part of that group rather than being an outsider interloper woman, I don't know if I end up getting to borrow off all of your, I don't know, honestly.
I don't know whether I hope that's, yeah, I don't know whether I hope that's true or not.
I know, I don't know what to do. I mean, I think about it a lot, and I think about what would happen if I got some of the sorts of crap that I see other women suffering. Like, what would I do? Like, I feel like I would call on my Twitter followers to be like, hey, this person's, they're not great, like, do something about it. I mean, you do get negative comments as well. I mean, there's a difference. I haven't had abuse. I've had negative comments, and especially, you know what YouTube's like. You put stuff on YouTube and someone goes, oh, they mispronounced that thing. Like, no, because I'm English, you know, I don't like her British accent. Well, I'm not going to do anything about that, you know. And there was something I was talking about sets, S-E-E-T-S. And people were saying, I didn't really hear that right. That's not the word I thought that she said in that video. And I've written blog posts where people have been like, I violently disagree. You don't know what you're talking about. I don't, you know, and things that they do hurt you on the inside, because you're just like, but I really believe this. But that stuff, that is different. That's not necessarily abuse. That's
there's certainly a distinction. So one of the things that I've noticed as my YouTube channel has got more popular is, you know, for the videos that are kind of to my community, there's a conversation that goes on, and then occasionally I'll get a video that kind of reaches out outside, and I'll get some really bizarre kinds of, you know, mildly abusive comments on somebody posted something that YouTube filtered out. I didn't filter out, but I saw it, and this chap said, you shouldn't listen to him because he's old, grumpy, and ugly. And even if those are true, what kind of basis is that to make a choice on about software? You know, you go to the Justin Bieber School of Software.
Exactly, and that's what kind of helps me a little bit. Like, when I can't even remember, because I have literally purged them from my mind. When people say things that originally used to hurt my feelings, like, oh, you don't agree with me, or you said something mean about me. Now I'm just like, that's honestly, I honestly feel like that's fine. It's your opinion. It doesn't, who the hell are you? Like, I'm not going to take my value from some random person on the internet. I've got people who I really value, people whose opinions I really value, who trust me and say great things to me, or tell me when I'm doing something that's not great, steer me in the right direction. I don't give a crap what some random person on the internet says about my content. Like, fine, it's not for you. Don't read it. I don't care.
You know? and you know, it's just because something I say offends somebody's sensibilities, there's no, you know, I'm sorry for that, but I still believe what I said. Otherwise, I wouldn't have said it. And you know, there's no defense against you. We're allowed to be offended. Or there are things that I find offensive, things that, you know, but that's my problem, not anybody else's.
Yeah, exactly. And people are allowed to disagree with me, and that's fine. I don't have I don't have to please everyone. I'm just telling you what I've discovered, what I've learned, what I feel. And if that doesn't mesh with what you think or what you feel, then don't read what I say. Like, that's fine. You're allowed to tell me you don't agree. Great. All right. Move on. You know. So
talking about moving on. So let's we're probably starting to run out of time a little bit. I've got one more question really, which is, so I know this isn't really your job to represent all women in IT, but you've probably got a better shot. But you've got a better shot at it than I have. So do you have any advice for women, either kind of taking the next step from where they are, want to do more speaking, more kind of advocacy, that kind of thing, or maybe women that are just at school at the moment and are wondering what to do, and you know, whether they should be thinking about kind of more STEM stuff, and in particular coming and working, you know, getting girls and women to come and working out, you know, encourage them to think about working in our fantastic profession.
I mean, I have a lot of advice, and there's obviously different types of advice for different levels and different types of people. My main thing is, the main thing I'm trying to teach people, and it's not just applicable to women, of course, is that it's hard, but you have to believe in yourself and try not to take your value from anyone else, which is a little bit of what we were just talking about.
Yeah.
Society is going to gently push you away from STEM or from computer science. It might not be as blatant as like, you can't do it, you're a woman. It might just be like, oh, there's no women here. Maybe it's not for me. Maybe, if you've got an interest in that sort of thing, you believe in yourself. It's absolutely fine. Don't listen to what other people say. People are always going to say stuff that you don't agree with. And people are going to push back on you. And that's just kind of, the sooner you can learn to deal with that, the more effective you're going to be in our industry. And so I all the way across the board, by all means, believe in yourself. So I also want to say for people in our industry, again, not just for the women, but in my experience, as a gross generalization, women will not, and I've seen this statistically somewhere, women generally expect to meet 90% of the criteria of a job role before they apply for that job role, and men generally 50%. I've made those numbers up, but men will be like, oh, I've got 2 or 3 of those things, I'll apply, because what's the worst that could happen? They'll say no, fine, haven't lost anything. And women are like, oh, I don't think I'll apply until I'm definitely ready to do that job. So it's really, really important to just keep doing those uncomfortable things. Apply for that job. Are you ready to speak at a conference? I'm going to say yes, but of course the answer is yes and no. Of course you're not ready, but you're not going to be ready until you've done it. So you've got to do that first one. My first conference was Java 1 with Martin Thompson. He said, do you want to co-present with me at Java 1? I was like, I was sort of hoping to work my way up to that. I wasn't really kind of present at the biggest Java conference in the world as my first presentation, but I had an opportunity. It was right there. Martin, again, sponsored me, pushed me forward and just said, co-present with me. You're ready to do it. Just do it. Like, okay. And that was saying yes to something as scary as that is what really launched my career to where it is right now, So take the opportunities. You're never going to be ready. So don't keep working towards being ready. Just go for it. And there'll be times when you don't get the job and you don't get accepted at the conference. And there'll be times when people write mean things on your blog post. But you just keep going until you get better at it. It's all about learning and it's all about growth. And there's going to be so much getting in your way in this industry, not just for women, as we know, but there will always be someone who tells you you're not good enough. There'll always be some crappy job that you're doing, which is just awful. There's so many things pushing you down. Don't let you be another one of those things that pushes you down and stops you from doing stuff, because there's plenty of that going around. There's no need for you to be part of the problem as well. Seek out mentors, and by all means mentor people as well. It doesn't matter how junior you are as a woman or as a man. It doesn't matter how junior you are. You can always mentor someone who's like 3 months behind you. There's always stuff. Or you can even like peer mentor each other, because you've got different backgrounds, different experiences. I spoke when I was getting started in this career. A lot of my friends at the boys' school, they studied computer science. They went into similar types of jobs. There were some people doing ops stuff, some people doing network stuff, and and some of them went on to do computer science at university, and some went straight into specifically ops, actually. But we were all open with each other about what our experiences were, and really importantly, what our salaries were. So I had a really clear idea in my head right at the beginning about what I was worth financially. So when I went into negotiations, I'm like, I know how much I'm worth, because my boyfriend, who's the same age as me, who studied the same stuff, not this one, previous boyfriend, is earning this much money. Like, I don't really see why you should pay me any less for that sort of thing. So peer mentoring is really, really important. Visibility, all of that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I've got loads more advice, but
that's great. And as you said at the start, that's not just about women. That's just about people.
Yes,
which it all ought to be.
Exactly, and that's what I'm really interested in. Like, I really want to help the women, because my experiences are more closely aligned with the other women's experiences. But like, I always want to say these things and be explicit about this should help everybody. And it's not, like I say, it's not a zero-sum game. Like, if you're all communicating about your salaries, if you're all mentoring each other, if you're all getting better at these different things, we all get better together. It's not that people get left behind. I don't think, well, we should only help the women because let's help the women. These things where people say, whoops, sorry, I'm getting excited. These things where people say, and if you've got a woman applying for a job and an exactly same qualified man applying for the job, who would you give the job to? Well, my answer is both of them, because
Yeah.
there's plenty of work. And
Yeah.
secondly, that never happens. There is no
Yeah.
such thing as two candidates with identical qualifications.
Yeah.
The very fact that she's a woman, for a start, means that she brings a whole bunch of different experiences compared to probably the rest of your team. Similarly, if you've like, okay, so what if it's a black man and a white woman? Like, who are you going to pick? Like, it's just pick people because they're individuals. Like,
Yeah.
everyone
pick people
should be
because you
heard.
like to work with them.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. I want to reiterate my thanks, Trish, for spending this time and talking so enthusiastically and thoughtfully about all of these ideas. I'm going to say thank you to everybody for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I've enjoyed taking part in the conversation. If you do have any ideas, thoughts, comments, leave them in the comment section below.
But be nice.
And
be nice.
But be nice. And thank you very much indeed for watching.